Ananda itself is based on this concept of the householder. I mean, it's a lot of why these communities exist. Master knew that people needed spiritual communities, and I don't mean just those of us who live in the community. I mean the community at large that includes everybody, all of you. The mistake that we make, and it's totally understandable, is that the way to be with God, the way to grow spiritually, is by doing some spiritual practice, which of course it is. So we get very spiritual when we sit to meditate, or maybe we get very spiritual when we're creating a meal that the whole community is going to eat. And it's an important thing to do. I mean, in India, they take part of that meal or some food, they put it on an altar, they call it prasad, it's blessed. I mean, through food, that we can bless people. It's a spiritual practice, cooking, or maybe if you're singing in the choir, that's beautiful. But the mistake that we all make is that when we move out into the world, something's different or it changes. And because of that, we lose touch with God, and we think we're not living for God alone. But again, if we hold it differently, if we change our mind, you know, I always come back to that saying. Sai Ganesh was just talking about it in Raja Yoga because he gave this first class. And it's either there or it's in the chapter on energy, but it doesn't matter. Somewhere, Swamiji writes, if you take these teachings from Raja Yoga, which is all of our teachings, it's the royal yoga, it's what we're doing. And we compress it into 14 weeks and we share it with people, but it's the life of a yogi on their way to self-realization. Swamiji says, if you actually take this seriously, if you mean it, if you really want to know yoga means to become a yogi, it will take a complete revolution of the mind. I always get confused. He did say revolution, but I always wanted to say revelation. It does take that too. Meaning, he says it. Your mind will not see things the same way. It won't think the same way. It won't take in any of the sensory input the same way. We change our minds. It's not a simple phrase. It's everything. It's the spiritual path. And that's what we need to do as householders or as working people. All of us, everybody, every person. I was just running through people that I know living in community, in the congregation. Who of us doesn't have challenges? People in our life that are great for our sadhana, because they're difficult. And if they become our sadhana, means open our heart, practice loving them, practice seeing them as God. If we don't go to work, but we go to serve God in everything we do, what we do doesn't matter. The attitude that we do it with matters. Same thing with our friends, with our partners, with people in our community who wouldn't be our friends if they weren't in the community. We might not step out and say, gee, I'd love to spend a lot of time with that person, because we're limited. We're still limited. And what we're trying to do is, again, take every opportunity to welcome spiritual growth in every way that we can. And boy, I don't know that there's anything much richer other than if we can actually sit and meditate deeply. which is hard. But if we can do that, that's richer. Otherwise, our bumping into all of these different people, experiences, they're all opportunities for us. So we can't keep saying, how can I live for God alone when I have to go to work? You know, if you look at a couple who's just had a baby, and let's say the baby's 3 months old, what do they see when they see that baby? Or what do they feel? Their hearts open, they feel inspired. The baby, of course, is still closer to God than they are. So part of that's the gift. That soul is still remembering more than we remember. But if we can grab that kind of a moment, or a puppy, I mean, literally, a new puppy, you don't judge the puppy. No matter what the puppy does, it can tear up your favorite shoe. It can make a mess all over your house. It's a puppy. You love it. You love a baby. You see it all as an opportunity to love, not as an opportunity to be judgmental, to feel overworked, to dislike certain people. Of course, we all do that. But the point is, our lives are here for us to learn to not do that. And the more evolved we are, the harder the tests are, and the closer we are to people, very often, the more difficult it is. Your partner, your children, your parents can be very hard to just see them without judgment because they have such an impact on our lives. I was just on this beautiful trip. I drove up one day. I spent 2 days in Yosemite, up in the high country, and I drove home the next day. It wasn't a long trip, but it was quiet. The park is almost empty. Almost. I mean, a few hundred people I saw. It's nothing when you're up in Tuolumne Meadows and roaming around up there. No traffic on the road. Bright blue skies up there. Perfect temperature. Beautiful mountain lakes to dive into and swim into. Perfect. Perfect. Deep meditations. And I drive home and I open the door and say hello to Barry, my partner, for those of you that don't know. And he hasn't been in Yosemite. He hasn't been feeling that much closer to God because he's up out of this vibration. He's right in this vibration with all of the problems, issues, difficulties, things that have confronted him. And he wanted to tell me about them right away as we were carrying my suitcases in. It's like, whoa, okay, all right, just like that. Take a deep breath, Shanti. Breathe with those vibrations. You are still with God. You are looking at God. This is God having a different experience than you are. But it sounds small, but you know, it was like that. Not, hi, sweetheart, how was your trip? Tell me about it. Let's do a little transition here. Nope, was not like that. It would be very easy to get angry. I mean, think about it. It would be very easy to say, what's wrong with you? Why are you bombarding me with all of this? Why are you in such a terrible mood? Your house didn't burn down. You know, you're not in all that smoke. I could go on and on. Look at the problems that you think you have. They're not problems. Not so for him. Problems. Now they're my problems. Can I love him? Do I see God in him? Okay. It's no different than being in Yosemite, really. It's not. It's easier for me in Yosemite, but that just speaks to my limitation in a way. So I hope that answers your question.